Well timed.
The last time you invited me to Calgary, it was 11 below, and it was a lot colder than I expected. Um, so yeah, so I come to this late in the game. I'm a power platform guy at heart. I started implementing Dynamics, actually the precursor called CRM, Microsoft CRM 1.0, literally in January of this year. That made 20 years since I started implementing it. And my expertise has always been on that side of things, but it was really kind of late that I came to the game where I said, I realized that the real value of data, the real value of these business applications is in the data that's sitting inside of it. The data that's in there can make or break a project, make or break an implementation inside of an organization. And those of you who are data professionals, total respect to what you started with and where you are now. But I want to encourage you to look into your organizations at the Power Platform users and the Power Platform implementations that might be there. You may or they may not have bubbled up to the surface yet for you, but it's a tremendously growing. And by Power Platform, I'm really thinking about Dynamics 365, like customer engagement, the finance and operation, Power Apps that are built with a Dataverse backend. All of these business applications are taking hold in organizations with this huge, rapid move. But what's not always in first place is they're not paying attention to the reporting and the analytics, and they're missing out on the value of the data that's sitting inside there. So you as a data platform expert have a tremendous opportunity to make a difference in these organizations. And so my confession is that I came to this late, and I'm excited for what you guys are doing and making this move forward faster. Okay, so I want to share a few ideas about how to get data from Dataverse, which is that underlying data platform that sits underneath Dynamics 365 and Power Apps, the model-driven Power Apps, and some of the other Dynamics platform, Dynamics products. How to get that from there into Power BI. And I'll talk about the first two kind of just to give you context, and then we'll dive into specifically the Synapse side of things. And we'll probably take a vote at some point. Is it Synapse or Synapse or whatever? It's who knows what the true pronunciation is. So three basic patterns, and I'll talk about the first two that are not Synapse, and then we'll talk about Synapse. The first pattern is just moving direct query from Dataverse into Power BI. And if you're familiar with direct query, you know the joy and sorrow involved in writing direct query reports. The strength of it is it does bring the security model, or it leverages the security model of the data that's sitting inside a Dataverse, and that's respected, and that controls what data shows up in the report design. The downside is that's a slower approach, and it's also kind of limited into what users will accept in terms of performance and refresh speed. A second choice is using the VertiPack engine that's built into Power BI. You know, we don't really think of it as a separate product, but it's really inherent to Power BI. You have that VertiPack engine that holds the data, and we can import data from Dataverse through the connector into VertiPack, and then that makes the data on the report surface really snappy and fast. This import mode is really good for data sets. There's a current limitation of 80 megabytes, which is actually being removed, but it's still, we're talking about in the, hundreds of thousands of rows is probably realistic to pull across the Dataverse connector. So that's think about like departmental apps and things like that. It might be appropriate to pull that. But the limitation again becomes that I need to pull enterprise-sized data where I'm pulling millions of records, or I want to pull that data over and mash it up with ML, or mash it up with other signs of other data before I've then imported into Power BI through the VertiPack. That approach leads us to our third choice, which is what we're going to talk about mostly today. And that's where we move it out through the Synapse Analytics side. And from Dataverse, we set up It's set up in the background, a continuous pipeline that moves the data as changes are made in Dataverse. New records are added or updated or deleted. All those changes then get put into a pipeline that goes into the data lake. And I'll just throw this in there right now. Today, the current version of this is moving it out to a CSV file or set of CSV files. The version that will become a public preview in another not too distant future. I'll actually demonstrate it. It's a private preview right now. It's coming out in the next month or so. In terms of public preview, is instead of moving it out to a CSV file, we'll move it out to a Parquet file and take advantage of Delta Lake. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But conceptually, it is moving the data from Dataverse down into the Azure Data Lake. Once it's in Data Lake, then the Synapse can be a wrapper around that. Synapse serverless can be a wrapper around that, so I can write SQL queries against that data and make it really easy to import into Power BI. So 3 approaches. Direct query import mode, and then the Synapse Analytics. And of course, we'll focus on the third. So let's talk about that third option there. What is the Synapse Analytics, Synapse Link for Dataverse? It really started long before it was a public product, as a private internal product that was used to pull data out of Dataverse and put it in the lake for analytics data to be run against. And then that analytics data would be fed back into Dataverse for some of the insights tools. Some of the leadership at that time said, "Hey, this is amazing stuff. Why don't we make this available for customers?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, that's actually a good idea. So we'll make it available." So they've actually moved it into a consumer facing product, so that you as a user who's using Dataverse can take advantage of it. So that really is the Azure Synapse Link for Dataverse side. And that really sets up this whole process, the whole pipeline that goes down the farm. This starts in Azure Synapse for Dataverse, which feeds out data into the data lake, the storage area, and then combining the data from the lake as well as metadata coming out of Dataverse, it creates views for us that we can then query to push into Power BI. So very straightforward process. There's a URL down below that you could take advantage of, and it really talks you through the process of, how does that work? It's fairly simple to set up. Beyond that, we're really talking about the Power Platform, and this is, again, we're talking about Power Apps, Dynamics 365, and those are feeding into the Synapse Link. They go out to the data lake, storage, and then out to Power BI. I think I actually duplicated that slide there. That's all right. Synapse Link for Dataverse. It's really a few clicks to get it started. It's not a complicated process to get started, especially on the CSV side. There's a few extra steps involved when you set up the Delta Lake version, but in the current version, the CSV file is very, very simple. And it sets up a serverless SQL pool that allows you to query, works with your warehouse, etc. A couple of considerations. It is an Azure subscription that this is built on. Of course, it's only built, your data lake storage is designed to be cheap for big data storage. It's designed as such. And the Synapse Analytics is only being paid based on the data you pull through it. That's like $5 a terabyte or something like that, some small amount. And it is on a very granular level that it's billing there. So it's really cost effective. The date time is in UTC format. So you do need to make adjustments for that based on which time zone you're wanting to represent your data in. And then of course, you're moving it out. So you have security that you need to address if you need row level type security, or you need to partition the data in some sort of way, bring it out to Synapse Link. Through Synapse Link, you need to apply that security later. The setup process, very straightforward. It's really going into, this is the Power App area, the Power App Maker app. In fact, let me just open up my, I think I actually have it open here. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. And we go to Synapse Link. Yeah. So from this page, I can set up a new link. And in that new link, I would give it a subscription that I want to connect it to, as well as the resource group, the workspace name, and the storage account associated with it. Once I've selected those items, I then go forward and just select which tables I want to sync out there. Very straightforward from that perspective. Let me open up one. This is an older version. This one is the one that's writing out to the CSV files. And you can see in this process, I've got, let me see, make sure I'm going to on the right sequence. Yeah, there's that. And then now I'm into tables. So it's probably more fun to see it in live in action. But this case, I'm writing out these tables. I've got the last time they were synchronized, the tables there were, how many synchronizations or rows that have been changed, as well as the choice of whether or not I want append only, meaning that if it's append only, these are not append only, meaning this is an overwrite, which is the default. It, as a record is out there, a row is represented in the lake. As I make a change to that row, that corresponding row is updated in the lake. The append only version, with append only is yes, then I'm going to be adding a new row each time that record in Dataverse changes. Meaning if I make 10 changes, there's going to be at least 10 rows for that table. So different scale, but it has some other capabilities or other options that are available to you. These are all the tables that are available, are tables within Dataverse who have change tracking set up. It's just an option in the configuration of the table. And it has both the regular types of rows as well as relationship rows where we have like many-to-many relationships. All those tables are available, as well as even principal object access. So very strong set. If you notice, I've gone to the advanced setting and flipped it on show advanced configuration setting. This is where I could choose append only, and I can set up the partition size for that how I want to subdivide that data that's being generated from append only approach. So just to be aware that is available to you. Once that's in place, we now start seeing the synchronization into the workspace. So let me go back into this and I'll show you what that looks like. In this case, I've got my synchronization, and I can, this is my Synapse Store. Actually, I'm going to go out of this one and go into the Delta Lake one, because we're going to talk about that one more. This is the one that's set up for going into the Delta Lake. And I can just click on the go to Synapse Analytics space. And it's going to open up the Synapse Analytics workspace for me associated with this data link, this Azure Data Lake link. And it sends it over, and we'll see the data. We can start analyzing it from within the Synapse workspace. In this case, I've got Lake database. Here's my Lake database that I've synchronized, and my tables, my account table, and like activity, etc. So those are all out there available for me to connect with. By the way, you'll see partitioned. That's kind of a legacy thing. Don't worry about those. You'll ignore those for the data lake side. That's really appropriate for the old side, and I think these will actually be hidden here soon. But anyway, once I've got the table out there, I can write a SQL script and query that data, and it will pull the data back from the data lake, just as if I was writing a standard SQL statement. I can also, correspondingly, I can go out to write it in our old friend SSMS, and I can connect to my data lake, my Delta Lake Synapse workspace, pass the data there, and I can query the data, writing it as a standard SQL statement from that perspective. So you'll see that. Let me talk a little bit more about what these pieces are. And one suggestion, this is the approach that we create out of the box. One suggestion is that I have found it somewhat easier in the queries that I write to add a custom view, a custom database that's just containing views of the data that's sitting in Synapse Analytics. And the reason I do that is most of the time I don't want, like an account table in Dataverse can have several hundred columns, and it's not usually likely that I need all several, couple hundred columns represented in the data that's appropriate for my reports. What I typically am going to suggest doing is create a new database, and all it's going to be is views on top of these existing Synapse Analytics views. These ones that are auto-created, those are read-only to you, so you can't modify those, but you can write a view on top of it and say, bring these 15 fields over, and the rest of them are either always blank or they're just not relevant to any of the reporting situations. There's another reason that might make it easier to do that is, so you would do you would create that companion view there, is there are metadata views in the data that are used to join with the option set numeric value. When I have a pick list, a lot of the fields in Dataverse are driven by pick lists or some sort of option set that's used to support multilingual strengths. And you can say, if the sky is blue, you can have blue, and then you have blue in French and blue in German or whatever. And each one of those will all be represented by the same numeric value, but there's a string associated with it that you can grab out of these global option set metadatas. And that's really what I'm doing here is, in this case, like for instance, here's an example. If I look at my option set rating code name, let me zoom in for a second there. I'm seeing the English name value of that, and also the same for purchase process name. Seeing the English version of that. I'm getting that from the query by, in this case, my rating code. I'm joining that with the option metadata and joining up the rating code option according to what I'm pulling off the code value there. That way I can join those together, past the language, past the entity, past the option set name, and pull back that string that I would want to use in my report. So this is a process that's out there. I actually have a separate video that's just around how this piece works. Even state code, status code, those are things that the data is stored in that numeric value. And so when I look at it in the lake, or when I look at it through the base views, I only see a numeric value. But by joining it to the string, this option set metadata, I can get the language label, and I can adjust that and say I want it in English, French, whatever, however you want to do that. So again, those are the options. I like doing this, and I like putting it into a separate database. In fact, in this environment, I don't have mine set up completely yet, but I've already got a Dataverse ADL database that I've created, and in that I don't have them in here yet, but I'll have the views, and this would become a view in that table. And then my reports, I'll always just point to the Dataverse ADL and say, you can pull the data off of that. So just a helpful hint along that perspective. So these choice labels, again, are available through those views. The second, I think I've mentioned earlier that, use it as a view as a report source. Again, there's a lot of columns in most Dataverse tables, even out of the box tables, that are not really necessary for your reports. So cleaning up, making a nice crisp view is really helpful to the end users. Yeah. So in this case, instead of this as being the query that I'm asking my users to write, I just put that query into a view, and I have my users write something simple like this. And then they can pull that off of the view and pull it in, and they can all be off and running with that data as such. Let me pause here for a second. Chris, I see your hand up. It's kind of hard for me to see everything going on here, but I see your hand up. What's up, man?
That's all right. So Jared's asking a question here saying, are these metadata lists the same as the string map when you query as an OData source?
Yeah, it's the same type of data. They're not identical to the string map, but it's the same concept. I used those string maps all before. It just took me a minute to figure out what the structure of that join is, and it's the same concept. Yep. Does that answer the question, I guess, hopefully? Jared? Thanks, Jared. See the thumbs up, man. Awesome. All right. So connecting data Power BI to the new views, you can point it to a view as such. And at the end of the day, that's what you're getting is that completion of the basic connectivity. Where I go from Azure Synapse Link, the data is moved into the data lake storage, comes up, the view is put in front of it to make it friendly and easy to consume. And then I've got a secondary view that makes it even tighter and cleaner. And then I can represent that data in Power BI. And within that, you've got the option of being able to see the types of data that you're seeing across that and being able to view it as such. So really incredibly useful to make that visible. And by the way, this is I don't know if you've noticed, but this is the PowerPoint embedding of Power BI. If you haven't used that yet, it's really cool. It lets you stick a full-blown Power BI report in as a window inside your PowerPoint slide. So I don't know if anybody's seen that yet. Have you tried that yet? Chris, have you tried it?
I have not, but I've watched some demos on it. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, it's really easy to include. And of course, all your data is when you're presenting to a customer, you're up to date. Some options there. You filter it, refresh it, reset it. You can actually store the data as you can actually set it so it's a screenshot static in case you're going to be moving it to a place where you wouldn't have live access to your data. So anyway, it's cool. So that's it from the demos, or the PowerPoint dive. Let me point to you to a couple of examples of me using this Delta Lake data to pull data into a Power BI report. So this is one that I've just updated today, and it's a sales dashboard. Let me show you what it looks like inside of Dynamics. So inside of Dynamics, I've got my Power BI report embedded in here, and I've got my opportunity to interact with it, my campaigns, the territories, and I can just use a field variable to change out what I want to filter and what I want to display, some bookmarks and magic there. So it's a lot of fun to be able to have a really interactive report that allows you to help. And how managers like eye candy. So you want to make sure you can address your audience well. The other parts of that are being able to take it and going into getting data from marketing. One of the things that, I come back to the beginning where I talked about the folks coming from the Power Apps side of the house. They have dashboards built into into the Power Platform, especially into CRM. But those dashboards are really designed for brief operational views of what's going on. Think of it like, what are the list of opportunities that as a salesperson I'm working on, or what are the list of the service cases that I have open right now. That's the type of stuff that the dashboarding inside of Dynamics or inside of Dataverse really is designed for. When you start getting into larger data sets, or you get more interesting questions you want to ask about the data, like show me the month-over-month change in the number of opportunities created, or the number of opportunities won, or revenue, et cetera. And I want to see it by marketing perspective, or by which owner, what a particular owner did, et cetera. That's where you start getting into more interesting questions that you can help a Power Platform user start expanding on and understanding what's in their data. Additionally, you can go further into it, things like, let's look at industries here. So industries, we have, the basic, the bubble chart, which everybody loves. And that bubble chart, I've got also over on the right, I've got different industries represented, as well as the different accounts within those industries. Let me let me find one that has a lot of opportunities here. Let me go to, this one. So Hoger has a lot of opportunities there. I can drill through on Hoger and understand more about the customer detail for Hoger and see a perspective on Hoger from this perspective. I can even jump up from here and hyperlink from that Power BI report up into Dynamics and see the Hoger record represented with a embedded Power BI report inside the context of the record I'm looking at. So once I'm on Hoger, it passes Hoger down to the report, and now I'm seeing the data for that for Hoger, and this can be data from, of course, inside a Dataverse plus data from an ERP system, a inventory, a customer voice type of application. This all can be data that can be combined up to give your users that 360-degree view. And again, this are things that as a data professional, these are tools that you know and love, but you can really make a huge difference in the value of these organizations, and they can start appreciating the value you as a data professional can bring to the operational type of excellence within the organization. Within this, let me go back to the same thing. I can look at it from this perspective where I say accounts with opportunities as potential customers. This is a standard view of the data that's there. And if I click on a datum, I click from there and open up the report and see that the corresponding embedded report inside that. Same thing if I looked at from my perspective, and I'm the owner of this record, I can click from there and go to a user record. In this case, my user record, as if I'm maybe I'm a salesperson, and as a sales manager, I can go to that record and have a conversation with this user. I have a conversation with myself, whatever. So Chris clicks on this and opens up my record and has a conversation with me about the opportunities I'm working on and the opportunities I'm engaged with, so that he can coach me on how to do better with that. So it's a really nice extension and a level up in terms of power that you're bringing in, that you as a data professional have, that the Power Platform people don't have until you bring that together for them. So let's look at that report outside of the published side of it. So if I look at this one, I've got as you would normally see, the sales measures, the campaigns, etc. These are my opportunities. I've cleaned it up a little bit and grabbed all my sales measures and put them up in my sales measure table, as well as I'm using the Bravo date calendar creator, which makes it nice to create a nice date thing. Plus, I can break out things like revenue into the different types of measures that are out there, like average one, et cetera. And then time intelligence, I can see within time intelligence, average growth to date, month over month, et cetera. All those get created automatically by the Bravo tool if you choose to let it do that. It's kind of nice. Let's go over to the transform side. And in this case, these dashboards I've set up using the out-of-the-box Dynamics fields and column fields and tables, so that they're easy to take and apply to an existing Dynamics 365 sales organization. And this one is set up so that we'll pull the data off the data lake. So as I pull that up, it'll kind of go out, and this one is running off the Delta Lake, so it does spin back up the Apache Spark pool there and makes it available. And I can go to the advanced editor, and I can see that I'm basically just writing a SQL statement against that data and pulling it in and making it available through and I'm basically just renaming my tables. The only thing I'm doing within it is I pass in where exists, where I say I only want the opportunities that have been closed within the last X number of months, 2 years or whatever, that I want to do. That way it's, I don't go grabbing 10 years worth of data when I'm only going to be reporting on the last 2 years worth of data. But that really becomes the case. I put everything in as a parameter. This is the GMT offset for, I'm using this in Central Time Zone. And so when I have dates that come in, again, the date is stored in Synapse in Dataverse, and also it'll show up in Synapse as the GMT time zone. So I just make the adjustment. In this case, I'll bring it in here. There it is. So I take that created on date time here, and I apply a number of hours offset, in this case, -6 hours or -5 hours, and I set that as a date. That way it just shows up. So, if somebody closes an opportunity at 7 p.m. on December 31st in Calgary, it's going to show up in the database as 6 or 7 a.m. January 1st in GMT. But that's not what you wanted to be able to see. You want to see it in that time zone that you're reporting off of. So you just make that adjustment and it change it back to a date, and you're golden from that perspective. Any questions? Let me pause. I've kind of been running my mouth. I don't get a sip of tea here. What's up? Any questions? Just in shock and awe. Jared, yeah, what's up? Can you come off mute?
Yeah. So I tried implementing this a year ago, and the Synapse environment that we had was behind a private endpoint. I know this was on the roadmap for Synapse Link a while ago. Do you know if that ever got addressed, or if this will work with Synapse that are on private endpoints?
There is a specific change, a public preview that's coming out in 2 weeks. I don't know if it's exactly what you're asking for. Jared, shoot me a message. Let me ask, because I don't know for sure that's the case. There's been a lot of changes in the last year, but I don't want to speak to it without actually knowing for sure, Jared.
Yeah, just to fill that in a little bit more, Scott, it is definitely it's a private endpoint, and the 3 Synapse subscriptions do not connect to the internet at all.
Yeah. So
It's
yeah, I'd have to if you're inside obviously it has to connect to something to pull the Power BI, to be able to query it, for the user to be able to consume it. Whether they can consume it from Power BI or not, I guess that's really a Synapse question.
That's correct. Yep.
What else? I just want to pause. I think I'm kind of hitting the end of my time here, but I want to pause and just ask: has this been helpful? Is this information that's useful to you? Is anybody already using this in production today? Whether using the Delta Lake or using the CSV version of that. Sean, Jared, you're using it. All right, cool. Some others. Yeah. And so it's a tremendous opportunity to get lots of data out. Just an FYI on the other side where we talk about bringing it from Dataverse directly. Let me show you one example of that. That is, again, I mentioned earlier that there is a change coming very soon that allows me to PBX, that's the one. That allows me to read Dataverse data. I actually have examples where I'm reading more than 1 million rows using the connector directly against Dataverse, where I just write a SQL query against the data coming out of Dataverse, and I'm getting decent performance from that perspective. And I'm not going to say that's direct query, but when I refresh it from Dataverse into that, the limitation used to be that it would only return 80 megabytes. But in fact, if you test it in your environment today, you probably will find that limitation is gone. It's not announced yet, but the limitation is gone, and they're putting the final tweaks on it before they make a public announcement on it. But in this case, you're seeing it's almost identical, approach. In this case, let me open up hit the wrong thing. Cancel. And transform data. We'll look at what this one looks like. The difference in this case, instead of reading from Synapse, in this case, you'll notice that I have the Common Data Service connector attached, and I'm using the Common Data Service connector, and I do use this create navigation properties feature turned off, which is very, very helpful to performance-wise. But I'm ultimately just passing a SQL query down, and at the end of the SQL query, when I get finished with it, there's a statement here. I want to make sure that I add that hint to it, enable folding equals true, and it will pass changes that I make on the front end. It'll pass that down and make it part of the query. So we'll fold it, hopefully make it, it's not returning all the data. So it makes it a much more performant approach. Sean, you got a question?
Yeah, sorry, and I certainly won't hold you to any dates or so on, but in terms of the private beta for the Delta Lake right now, any gut feel, like, is that going to be within the next month or two, going from private to public? Is that kind of in that time frame? Okay,
that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So it started back before, back in November, and they're finishing off. There was a couple things. There was a question, like, in fact, it still shows up those are partition views, which are no longer necessary. So they're polishing off some rough edges, but it should be out public in the next month or so.
That's great. Thanks.
Yep. Good. Well, Chris, I think I've hit my 45-minute mark. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to share with your audience here what's going on here. And if you have questions, by the way, just as an FYI, I'm not a YouTuber. That's definitely not my bag of tricks. But I did put on a playlist. Let me grab the URL for this. I put a playlist up. It's going to start playing. Let's go back and view playlist. I'll drop this in the chat window. It's just a playlist of me introducing the concepts of the data lake, and I go into a little bit more detail about how these are set up and run. Another one that's useful is, in this case, go to security patterns. And this one is a video I did recently about how the data inside a Dataverse is partitioned and secured, and what are the choices you make when you come into that conversation, as you start having a conversation with a customer about dealing with security patterns, because it's not one size fits all. There are multiple ways to approach it. Each one has its strength and weakness, or it has its appropriateness. And so those are available to you as well. Final thing I'll throw in there, last bit of guidance here, is I wrote a document. I wrote a document that I created based on my experience with building Power BI reports. Like I said, I started from the Dataverse side, and as I moved over to the Power BI side, and Chris was there when I was first learning it, there were things that I was trying to do the hard way. I didn't realize it, but I was doing it the hard way. And gradually over time, I took those notes and those learnings and created a document that may be obvious to you as a data platform expert, but as you're working with somebody from the Dataverse side, you want to keep in mind the ideas here that you have about what are the choices you're making, what are the things that you have when you move the data over. What's the importance of a star schema? That's a first thing that usually trips people up, is they move from a relational model to Power BI and they just lift and shift the model over, and they go through DAX gymnastics at that point. But by doing this approach, you've got a choice there. So anyway, I'll pause there and tell you thank you. And Chris, thank you very much for the invitation.